All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. We gave a couple minutes. People, as they come in, it'll be fine. So my name is Chris Ayers, and today I'm going to be talking about starting an allyship journey. I'm a senior customer engineer at Microsoft. I'm on the what they call the Fast Track for Azure team. So inside Microsoft, there's Azure Engineering. It's the team that builds the Azure platform, and we have a customer experience program inside that. And I help customers, kind of like with consulting, I help customers get onto Azure, deploy successfully, reliably with DevOps at scale. I'm on all the socials. You can find me. I have a blog, and GitHub repos, and all that fun stuff. But we're not here to talk about technology today. We're going to talk about people and some culture stuff, so I want to set some ground rules, okay? No one's going to be singled out, like we're not trying to pick on anybody or any groups, but please, let's try to keep some open-minded respect. We're going to be talking about potentially some sensitive topics. We're going to be talking about things that might make you feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. So let's try to limit some of the conversations and, do active listening. If you do want to share, I think that's awesome. I would love for you guys to share and contribute. But if you do share, try to use your own personal experiences, okay? Talk about the things you have experienced, like I feel and I think and I know. Don't try to speak for the whole room or for groups of people, like we and everybody. It really is about a personal experience. If you are someone who is talking a lot, other than me, if you feel like you're contributing a lot, make sure that you maybe leave a little bit of room for others. And it's okay to embrace a little bit of discomfort. Like I said, we're going to talk about some things. And if you feel a little bit uncomfortable, that's okay. This is like where you start to learn. When you start to feel a little bit of discomfort, you can look at yourself in the mirror and go, why am I feeling this? This is where we can grow, okay? So let's just be respectful. So we're going to talk about what is allyship. We are going to talk about what is privilege, unconscious bias, covering. Who knows what covering is? Oh yeah, this is going to be a good talk. Oh, we're going to have fun. We're going to talk about why it applies to you, why allyship is important to everybody, and how you can get started. Okay? So first, let's talk about allyship. Allyship is action. It's behavior. It's practices supporting other people. You're trying to support them, amplify them, advocate for people that you maybe are not part of the same social group of. You don't belong to that group, but you're trying to raise their voice or give their voice power. I know a very common, easy way people do this is retweeting things, using a hashtag, putting a little bumper sticker or something on your car. Those are very passive. Those are not about taking action, okay? Allyship really is a verb, and that means potentially asking someone to speak, or stepping out of the way, or asking questions to try to understand. It means doing something. It might mean rescheduling a meeting so that it's more accommodating to those that maybe have young children and can't make the meeting, or maybe they have prayer times and it's more accommodating to everybody by moving the meeting time. Instead of just saying, oh, we'll catch you up later. No, we're going to take an action, we're going to be inclusive and try to move things. Allyship matters, and this comes up a lot in the business sense. Like a lot of times you hear about allyship, just like you hear about diversity and inclusion, about how it benefits businesses, but really allyship benefits all of us. Allyship is about having a safe space. If you show up at work or you show up with your friends and you feel safe, like you feel respected and welcomed, and you don't feel isolated or edged out, that's important. Everybody deserves to be heard. You get growth out of working with allyship, because you start learning about other ideas, other ways of thinking, other cultures. It expands your worldview, and it makes you an easier person to get along with and an easier person to work with. And as you start going down this path, I always say, like, once you start becoming an ally and you start stepping down this journey, you start seeing opportunities to help people everywhere. And it goes from helping one person that maybe you're very close with, to groups of people, to seeing problems with the system that you might want to change. We took a walking tour since I've been here in Greece, in Athens, and there was a couple of comments made about, the amount of protests that happened here, that, there was a king, and, there were protests. There was a constitution, there were protests. If there's a problem with something, the people speak and use their voice. They take action. This is one of the things that we can do with allyship. If we see a problem with the system, if we see a way something is operating isn't working for everyone, we can use our voice to help others. So an ally is someone who's not part of a group, but might have some sort of privilege or power. At Microsoft, I'm part of what's called BAM, the Blacks at Microsoft group. I'm an ally there. I'm part of OLA, which is our Hispanic and Latinx groups inside Microsoft. I'm an ally to them. I am not part of either of those groups as far as someone in that socio, identity group, but I actively participate with them to learn about those different cultures and history that I don't know about, and to try to use my influence and my privilege to help those, groups have adoption, have stronger voices, to have their concerns heard more effectively. And it's not me doing it for them. I'm part of those groups. They are leading, and I'm following where they need to go. Allyship is not like, there's a lot of stories you might hear, like a white savior complex. I'm a middle-aged white guy. I'm saying that is not what I'm trying to do. It is not my job to go in there and be the white knight in shining armor that's going to save everybody. That is not what being an ally is. Okay? Now, when I talk about privilege, I mentioned being an ally is about leveraging your privilege. Privileges are something that you get just by being in a group. It's not something you earned. It's not something you bought. It's not something you got. It's just something who you are. For me, I have some privilege in the fact that I'm male. I have some privilege in the fact that I'm tall. I can reach things on the upper shelf. I'm joking. But that's ableism. I can walk around and go upstairs. That is a type of privilege. And a lot of people don't like talking about privilege. They feel that we are going to single things out, or that we should feel shame, or we should feel something bad. It's a thing. It exists. And this is just something we need to acknowledge, that there are types of privilege in the world. And once you can recognize that without trying to place blame or shame or anything like that, it lets you look at yourself and look at those around you and try to recognize that. Any questions so far about what I talk about when I'm saying allyship and helping others or being an ally? So I started down this route myself. I've been in the field 25 years. I've been programming since second grade. I've been doing this professionally since the 90s, and most of my career, and just like most of this audience, they look like me. It's been very rare there's been female engineers on my team, or in America, African Americans on my team. And so it's been a very consistent, siloed mindset. And you get in, like we talk about, these bubbles, thinking this is how things operate, this is the assumption of how we expect things to be, and it resists change. One company I worked at, we had a junior engineer who was female. She was amazing. This was 2015. So right when Angular was taking off and all the JavaScript frameworks were exploding on the scene, and she knew JavaScript inside and out. She was absolutely amazing. And I remember talking to my manager about hey, we should, listen to her ideas. We should elevate what she's doing. She probably deserves a promotion. And I just kept being told, oh, she's just a junior. Oh, she's being mentored. She's not that good. And it's just like this mindset shift, because every woman I saw in tech who was amazing was kind of sidelined, or they were kind of guided into roles like being a PM or being a tester. Engineering's hard. Well, why don't we move her into something that's more, set up for her skills? And so you see this type of stuff happening in the IT field. And we've seen it for years, and even today, we don't see a lot of representation, because some of this stuff, those voices aren't heard. They don't have a seat at the table. They don't have a seat at the hiring table. They don't have a seat at how jobs are written, job descriptions are written. So all those things impact where we are today, with less representation of different groups. People of color, other genders, different orientations. All these things aren't very well respected. I'm a gamer. Who's a gamer? Who likes nerd stuff? All right. So pretty much my whole life, I could put in a video game, hit start, and I get a white guy. Right? Like if you say I'm talking about an IT person, what's the default image that comes up? Probably a middle-aged white guy with a beard, maybe like some sort of alcohol or meat. Right? This is a privilege. This is an assumption. The reason I bring this up is there are more video games now that are women main characters. I mean, back in the 90s we had Lara Croft, but it was a very sexualized implementation of a main character. Today we have games like Horizon Zero Dawn or Forbidden West, and new Tomb Raider stuff, but you can see we still have a way to go, that this doesn't represent what society is like. It represents a very skewed mindset of things. But as an ally, it really doesn't bother me if I have to hit select to pick the alternate character before I hit start. That doesn't hurt me in any way. I can still enjoy the games. I can still enjoy looking at superheroes. I can find a superhero pretty much anywhere that looks like me. So being an ally, I'm completely supportive when I see alternate implementations or alternate representations, or they have characters like Ms. Marvel, who's Pakistani. That was an awesome show. If you guys didn't watch it, you should watch it. It's awesome. And the reason I bring some of this stuff up, where we're talking about not just race, not just gender, there's the concept, and I don't know who's heard of intersectionality. Yeah, 1 or 2 hands, 3 hands. Intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, essentially in the 80s. And this kind of comes out of some legal theory in the United States, where, the story is that she was reading a court case of a woman who was suing a car manufacturer, that they wouldn't hire her. She thought she was being racially biased, that they weren't hiring her because of her race. She was an African-American woman. And a judge just dismissed the case, essentially, because this company hired African-American men to do labor in the factory. And they hired white women to work as a secretary. But when you start looking at a black woman, they were worried that she might double dip. She might get 2 chances to complain about being discriminated against, or they're hiring blacks, they're hiring women. What's the problem? Well, the problem is we're not just made up of one identity. We don't just have one label for ourselves. I found this and I thought this was really great because this kind of goes back to that idea of privilege and the idea of power. Like when I say I'm kind of lucky, like in the US, I'm a citizen, I'm white, I've had some post-secondary, I'm pretty able-bodied, I'm heterosexual, I am neurodivergent. I have a lot of ADHD, a little bit of autism, like, I'm weird, it's okay. I have pretty robust mental health. I mean, I'm a little big, I'm kind of tall, kind of robust. That's probably liking the beer a little bit. But I do own property. I'd say I'm more middle class. I know English, I'm cisgendered. So I'm close to that center. But there are people that, if you look at me being a straight white male and someone else being a gay white male, there's a very different power dynamic just by changing one aspect of their identity. And that doesn't include the fact in America, I was raised Christian. And so there are lots of groups that because of that, I can get some advantage. If I were a practicing Muslim, or if I was following Jainism or just a different religion, Judaism, there would be a different relationship I might have with other people. They might not understand it. Let's say Islam, if I had to pray multiple times a day and that would affect my meeting schedules, would everyone be accommodating? And this is one way we can be an ally. If we can recognize our coworkers, maybe they have young children with school hours and we're always scheduling meetings in the morning. We can accommodate them by shifting a little bit and being a little bit more inclusive. Same with meeting times. Any questions on this? Or any thoughts? Or anything anyone wants to share? Yeah.
I think the order is not always the same.
No.
Of the society, right?
Yeah.
Being brown in France.
Yeah. Exactly. Many people cover. So I mentioned covering. Many people will hide one aspect of their identity, and maybe that aspect is the one that's stigmatized where they live. That could be xenophobia, maybe your background, like where you came from. Here in Greece, maybe some of the neighboring countries. Maybe if you have a Turkish background or something like that, or if someone came from North Korea or China, that might have a different impact in the United States. People might hide that. This could also mean, in America we have people that might have a lot of dreads or tattoos, and when they go to work, they cover them up. They try to hide that part of their identity. They cut their hair, they wear long sleeves to cover up things, and they hide parts of who they are. They don't show up as their whole self at work, and they don't feel like they can open up with their coworkers, so they don't have those relationships. They're always hiding and maybe afraid that they might be discovered and then judged based on what someone just found out about them. There was terms that were very used heavily in America, like closeted gay people, where they were hiding their identity. They lived one life at home and one life at work. And that's very draining and hard on people to try to compartmentalize their lives. It's really hard to be happy with yourself if you have to hide who you are. And I bring this up because we all have unconscious biases. We all have some sort of learned assumption or belief. We get them from our parents. We get them from television. We get them from movies, from books, songs. We get them from advertisements. Body shaming was very big in the news, and it still is because of advertisements. As soon as they change who they pick as a model or the person for their advertisements, there's whole things that happen online, and people get death threats and get scared off social media. Has anyone been in a workplace where comments are said about coworkers behind their backs? Yeah. Has anyone been in a workplace where comments were said about you behind your back for some reason? Yeah. How did it feel when you... Yeah. We all have these biases. So for me, we had Ted do the keynote a couple days ago about, going from development to manager. I had a similar journey. I was an individual contributor. I was an engineer for 20-something years, and my manager moved to another role inside the company. And I was afraid someone would come in that didn't know our team. So I stepped up and became a manager of 15 people, like overnight. I went from never managing to having 15 people and like 2 managers under me. And our goal at the time was to grow. We were going to hire people. We had 0 female engineers on the team. And I went through and I was like looking at biases. I actually did some reading on the mindset of people as they apply. So I looked at all of our job requirements, like what were, like has to have this many years of experience, has to have this degree, must have these certs. I loosened the language. Reading, a lot of women might not apply unless they have 100% of requirements. Many men will just fire it off. No, just out of school, fired off for 10 years experience. Like, we're arrogant. We'll give it a shot. What's the worst they can say? No. So we do that a lot. So I went through and I changed all the job requirements. We looked at where we were hiring. We were always hiring at certain schools. I was like, let's tweak where we're hiring. Let's look at different boards. Let's try to expand and actually get female applicants in. And then I knew I had unconscious biases. I would interview people and, they look like me. There's this unconscious thing like, hey, they look like me, they talk like me, they have similar background to me. They're like me, and I'm very driven and motivated. They're going to be too. So I tried to confront unconscious bias by, what if they weren't like me? Like in my head, I would try to cover up the name. What if it was a woman? What if it was a person of color? What if they had a different educational background, but they still did the same work? We would have panels in there where it's not just men or, I bring in women from the rest of the company so that we would have better panels so that we could counteract one person's judgment and have teams of people discuss and see what might be going on. You could also see if they had unconscious biases. If you have the women lead the interviews and they just started addressing the men. It's like, unconscious biases flow both ways. Now, I bring this up because I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Allyship is not a I'm done. Yeah.
It's about the previous slides.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the self-test that we can all do?
Yeah, there is a self-test that you can do for unconscious bias. I need to add that link to the resources because it is a great example.
It only takes a few minutes, right?
Yeah, we could do it real quick, yeah. Let me just look it up.
Is it the left-right one where you pick?
Yeah.
You have to categorize things left to right, and then it makes you categorize 2 things at once?
Yeah, let me just look up one real quick. The Harvard one?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a variety of different...
No, thank you. I should have added that in there. That's a great idea.
Which unconscious biases you might have. So you might not have them in some areas, but you might have them in others.
Yes.
It's useful to know about yourself.
All right, there we go. Take a test. Let me see if I can bring this over. Thank you. That's a great idea. I should have set up a link to this. But yeah, you need to log in. But I will post a link to it. But essentially, you can come out here and look at, some of your implicit biases around, different things, so social attitudes, or if you look up essentially Harvard unconscious bias, there are some tests that you can take. Thank you. That was yeah, and if I can get a link, we could maybe try to do that together as a group at the end.
It can be quite disturbing. You learn about yourself things that you really hope weren't true. But
Yeah, and that's why I said in the beginning on the ground rules, like, we might be a little uncomfortable. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. Like, this is really about, when we do software development, we do Scrum, we take retrospectives and we stop and we look back and we kind of examine why we did a thing or how it worked out. And this applies in our daily life. How did that meeting go? How did that interaction with that person go? Like, why am I feeling this way? Why did I act that way? You can take a minute and reflect and think about it. And try to counteract that or try to uncover why you're facing it. Like, we all have them, but if you're aware that you have it, you can handle it a little bit better. Now, like I was trying to say, you're not gonna, hey, I'm done. I have got the checkbox, I got the certificate, I'm the ally now. Allyship really is a daily learning process. We are gonna make mistakes, we're gonna say the wrong thing. We're going to miss an opportunity, or maybe even we're going to try to be that hero and do too much and counteract a slight or a insult right then and make a big deal out of it when the person really doesn't want you to. Like I said, this is not being an ally for them, it's with them. So you need to follow their lead. Now, this is the framework that Microsoft uses a lot. I really like it. A lot of times you might start with a friend, or you might start with a family member. In America, we see this all the time when senators or congressmen have a family member that suddenly identifies as a group they might be targeting. They back out and just get quiet because they realize suddenly that they're not an ally for anybody, and maybe they're going to be an ally for one, their family member. Maybe you're an ally for a friend. And it's okay if you're in an underrepresented group to be an ally to a different underrepresented group. Everybody needs help, okay? But if we're targeting one person, it is a narrow viewpoint. I mean, there's lots of, as we talked about, different levels of identity, gender, socioeconomic status, education, ableism, sex, race. And so if you just target one thing, you actually might be hurting other groups. And so this is why it's a journey. Over time, you start to realize, you are helping one person, but you might be trying to shut someone else down. And as you do some of this allyship work, as you practice being an ally, you start learning how to start being an ally for bigger groups. Trying to be an ally for some, not just that one person, but maybe a whole group or different groups. And then trying to look at different competing and opposing groups, just having activities that align without hurting anyone. So why should you be an ally? Why you? Well, for me, it led to a lot of personal growth. We always see why companies need to have D&I programs, why companies try to do allyship. It's all about profit and better products. But what about you as a person? And for me, I grew as a leader. I grew as a mentor. It let me practice empathy in a better way. It helped me see and learn about those cultural impacts, racial issues people were struggling with, gender issues people were struggling with. I would suggest if you haven't, I was actually talking with Ted, the keynote speaker, the other night, and his wife, and she had said early in his career, she had said something about, yeah, that's how, women are treated a very different way. And he's like, no. And then he talked to some of his coworkers, and he was like, oh, yeah. So open your mind, open horizons, try to be a little respectful. Something to be aware of is, it's made me a better collaborator. It's made it easier for me to work with others and better to work with others. So how do you get started? Be curious. Listen. Realize it's really not about you. You're not there to be the hero. It's not about you. It is really about these groups. Realize there's more than one life experience. I think I remember reading about it like everyone is the hero in their own book and sometimes you don't always realize that the people around you are not just background characters, they're their own hero of their own story. So in this case, it's not about you. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to go from helping one person or small groups of people to helping and being active in a community. Communities need all sorts of voices, those that can be in the rooms where they're not, those who can be at the tables that they're not, those whose influence and votes or voice carries more weight. These are all things we can leverage. This was a tweet from Kayla Reed I really liked. Allies always center the impacted, listen and learn from those who live in oppression, leverage your privilege, and then yield the floor. Now, something I like to say is it's not always good to just start questioning people like, oh, tell me how bad it is. Tell me how you were oppressed. Tell me that, because you're just asking them to relive pain potentially. We have agency. We can go find a book. We can go educate ourselves if we're curious. We can go watch a YouTube video and we can come back with a little bit of understanding if we need to without asking a person to relive traumatic experiences or being ignored or edged out. You know what I mean? It's not always the best thing to just start questioning people. Hey, can you explain, your experience as a Black American and all the oppression and fear of police to me so that I can understand that better? I'm not going to do that. That is disingenuous, and I can go educate myself. So, any questions at the moment? I really want like I said, I would like a dialogue. So if someone has an experience they want to share or something they want to talk about, I'm more than welcome to. I do have some resources I'll talk about a little bit, and then we can try to do the unconscious bias. But any questions? Yes?
How do you counter the situation where you find people telling you that you're maybe doing positive discrimination or you're maybe over-rotating? So how would you, I'm not suggesting you are, but
right.
You hear people say, oh no, we can't do that because we're overly, so how would you recommend that we counter that in those situations? How do we respond to that?
So you're saying essentially instead of a negative type of discrimination, it's a positive type of discrimination, or
you'll hear people say, oh, we can't do that because it's positively. I don't agree with it, but I'm just saying.
So one of the reasons I actually made this talk is I have run into people at various jobs and work that don't see any value in allyship. They feel that they're being replaced or that they are starting to be persecuted as someone like me. Oh, I'm being edged out as a white male. And I don't think that's true, and I don't think that's the case. Again, this is, in my mind, very much just understanding that I've been in a system where I have had a lot of benefits, and there's nothing wrong with evening that playing field a little bit and helping make sure that that diversity of thought, the diversity of experience comes through. There's nothing negative about that in my mind. It's really, it's how do you say it's okay to keep pushing these voices up and pushing these voices down? I don't. It's a tough situation, but I hope that answered it in some way. I know I stumbled a little bit there.
Yeah, it's tough to,
Yeah, it's a tough thing, and this is part of why it's a journey. You're always learning, you're always reading, you're always trying to be a little bit better at this. Yes.
Is this like your is this a formal role in your company, or is this like more like a way of thinking that you try to do and the way
It's a way of thinking and working, yeah. So,
so other people know that they can turn on you when they have some kind of
yeah, I act as a mentor for a lot of my coworkers. Sometimes if I'm in a meeting and I see, so like we've distributed some guidance around language. In America, there's a history of a lot of terms that have evolved over time. Like in Git, we don't use master branches anymore. We use main branches. And so if I see them, I'll usually reach out to the person and go, hey, we've tried to move away from that language because it has some negative connotations for some groups. Same with brown bag lunches. We switched our language to just be a little bit more inclusive, like, hey, we want to do a lunch and learn or a learning session. For those that don't know, in the United States, the brown bag test was where they would check the color of someone's skin against a brown paper bag. If it was light enough, they could work in the house. If it was dark enough, they would be out in the field. So it harkens back to a time of slavery. And there's people who are alive today that have experienced that. So not everyone knows it, but once you do know where the history of the term comes from, and you go, oh, that might make people feel a certain way, it takes no energy for me to change my language a little bit. We do it all the time in a lot of heterosexual groups when someone gets married and they change their name to take on, their partner's name. We all accept that. We're okay with it. We change their name. We understand it. This is like being supportive of trans people who are changing their name and changing their life. So it's just something we all can try to do. There's no formal role. Yes, sir.
Would you also say that applying that kind of thought onto other regions of the world where maybe you're not aware of like American history, but you could still in a Nordic company apply this?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at parts of Asia, there's a deep classism, history of classism where there's different classes. And so there can be judgment based on classes. In Nordic, there's...
My kind of thinking is like, let's say the brown bag example.
Yeah.
That maybe working in a Nordic company who is not aware of this kind of brown bag term and the history in the US.
Right. There's, like I said, there's differences. Like in some companies, there's nobody in that socioeconomic group or identity group that knows anything about it, and maybe one person comes in and is aware of the history of it. Is your company completely defined to Nordic people? Have you ever had someone who's an immigrant from another country come in and see that and go, oh, like, we live in a global world now, like a global economy. We have remote workers. We have customers. So if you've ever invited a customer to a brown bag lunch, and they go, oh, yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you have affinity groups or employee resource groups at Microsoft?
Yes, we have so many. We have family groups, military groups, gay and lesbian groups, Black American groups, Hispanic. These are some resources I'll put up, but like there's a guide to allyship.com, which is great. Kimberly Crenshaw did a talk on intersectionality. This was a TED Talk. It's very interesting. It is a little bit more US slanted, to be honest. Also have a book by Robin DiAngelo. This is one that Again, there's a little U.S. slant on some of these. We have some histories in the South. There's also a TED Talk here on being a better ally to women. And like I said, you can reach out and follow. I'd love to continue the conversation. I really want to thank all of you guys for taking the time to come here today and talk about this stuff. It's important, and I know that this is not usually the hot topics at a tech conference. So thank you guys for coming and enjoying the conversation.